Hard to believe we've had our Tesla Model Y for over a year. Originally, I was going to organize this video like I did my 1 month video, telling you about the things we like, dislike, and things that surprised us and making suggestions. And I will cover those areas, but I really wanted in this video to emphasize what we've learned. So even though I will cover each of those things, we've learned a lot over the last year. And I think the best way to break that up is into categories. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our maintenance, charging, interior, full self-driving, navigation, driving tips, camping, and accessories, and then we'll have some final thoughts. We did end up trading this car in for 2023, so I'll discuss that as well. And we're going to have a giveaway. So let's get started. Well, there you go. You just witnessed my entire maintenance for 1 year, putting windshield wiper fluid into the car. Well, actually, that's not true. We did rotate the tires and did that about 15,000 miles, and a bit surprisingly, there was 50% left. So I'll be lucky to get 30K out of these tires. I won't do the math for you because it's a bit depressing, but if you live in a place where your electricity rates are inexpensive, like ours are, 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour, you're likely going to spend about the same on tire replacement per mile as you do for electricity per mile. As far as maintenance goes, pretty much the only thing else I did was wash the car. And here's the stuff I use. I really love it. It's incredibly easy. When you first get your car, you wash it and dry it, and then you spray 2 squirts per panel, and you wipe it until you don't see any smears anymore, and you let it dry for 48 hours. Then every 2 or 3 months, after you wash your car, you leave the water on it, you put 2 sprays on it, you wipe off the water, and that's all it takes. And it looks fantastic. I think the car looks as good as it did the day I got it. It was driving me nuts during the winter that I couldn't wash it. So we tried some touchless car washes, and one of them did an all right job. I might go back to that if it was closer, but another one I paid more for, and it did an awful job. So I decided I was going to do it here at home. So I bought an attachment for our utility room sink and ran the hose outside, preheated the car, very important, then turned the water on to where it was just barely lukewarm because I don't want to crack the windshields. And surprisingly, I was able to get a pretty good wash out of it. I do not recommend this for anybody because I do not want you to break your windshield. The only other maintenance we had was with mobile service, and that was actually an interesting story. I had played around with the headrests on the car, and about 10 miles later, I had somebody sitting in the passenger seat, and the back of the seat popped off, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together. So I put the panel back in, but it would never stay. So I was taking a walk in my son's neighborhood at the time, and I noticed there was a mobile service car there working on somebody's car. So I went down, had a good talk with the owner, and brought up to the mobile service guy that I just can't get this panel to stick. And he said, "Oh, I'll just drop by on my way out." And so he did. He took one look at it and said, "I wish they'd put it in the manual that these headrests aren't adjustable." Well, apparently the headrest holds the seat panel in place. So he just put the panel back in, pushed the headrest down, was there a minute. Couldn't have been more polite. I tell you, what a neat service to have. The most important thing we learned about charging is that I spend far less time charging my Tesla than I would have spent filling up my ICE cars. And the reason for that is 99% of my charging is done at home. It takes me 2 seconds to plug it in and 2 seconds to unplug it, and I've got a car as charged as I want in the morning when I'm ready to leave. Now, granted, supercharging is going to take longer, but we only go on like 3 trips a year. Truth is, on trips, we have to stop for rest stops more often than we need to supercharge anyway. And if you combine it with lunch, the car's almost always ready to go before we're done with lunch. It's never been an issue. So the supercharging percentage of my total charging is very small. So overall, I'm definitely charging less than I would to refuel my other cars. The other thing I'm doing is I'm charging up to 60%. And the reason I'm doing that is I read an article that said your battery life will be best extended by bracketing 50%. So if you drive 20% a day, then 60% down to 40% brackets 50% perfectly. And that's about what we do. And it seems to have worked because my last recurrent report showed that my range in 3 years has creeped up a bit. We have had 2 instances of range anxiety. One was on a trip we took from Las Vegas down to Phoenix, but I'll get into that more when we talk about trip planning. The other was we had just finished charging up, and I usually leave it so that I arrive at my destination with 15%. Well, 5 miles down the road, it was saying I was going to get to my destination with 9%, so I was going, what the heck is going on? I don't know if the headwinds were stronger than it had anticipated through the forecasts or what, but we just went down the road to another supercharger, filled it up, and it behaved itself from then on, and we got at our destination within a couple percentage points of its estimate. There's also a major misconception with EV charging that I'm probably going to address in another video. The short version is that people tend to look at the range as being highway range because in your ICE cars, the best range you get is on the highway. So that causes confusion. People think they're going to get trip distance at 80 miles an hour, and that's not the way it works because wind drag is your biggest factor at the higher speeds, and wind drag is the square of the speed. So, for example, your aerodynamic drag at 80 miles an hour is more than double what it is at 55 miles an hour, even though it's less than a 50% increase in speed. So if you're going 80 miles an hour, you're going to get significantly less than the 330 miles stated range for the Model Y. Bearded Tesla guy had a nasty experience that encouraged me to replace my inexpensive 1450 outlet with a higher quality one. This is backed up in the manual where they do recommend a particular brand. I'll leave a link for it in the description. But the problem is these things aren't meant to be plugged in and out. And every time I go on a trip, I unplug my charger to take it with me, just in case there's some place at my destination where I can plug in and charge up. So I'm removing it, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. These outlets were not made to do that. They're made to be unplugged every 20 years when you unplug your dryer and replace it. So I put in a higher quality outlet, but I also have made a habit of flipping off the circuit breaker before I pull the plug out because I've had the tendency to wrap my fingers around the back, and that would be a very bad thing. It's a hard plug to remove. Tesla should have a handle on it like RV outlets do, and that would allow you to easily pull it out, but they don't. So before I remove my charger, I go down to my circuit breaker, I flip it, then I pull the charger out. And then when I come back home, I plug it back in, and then I flip the circuit breaker back on. Speaking of taking charging cords in and out of the outlet, don't forget to take your charging cords on your trips. I have done that once. It is not fun to be sitting at a supercharger when you could have just been sitting visiting with your son while your car charges in the garage. I also bought an adapter for camping so that I could take advantage of the outlets in campgrounds. I was kind of surprised to see that the charge rate there was half of what my charge rate is at home, but then I realized that the campground outlets are 110 volts, not 220 volts. So though the amperage was the same, the actual power going into the battery is about half. Speaking of charging, I don't understand why our cars don't have bi-directional charging. That way we could use our car as a backup if our home lost power. Now granted, it would only be able to feed through the existing circuit at 50 amps, but for those of us with generator hookups, you could make an adapter so that we could hook the cable that would normally go to the generator to our car, and that would allow us to back up the house during times of power outages. You wouldn't want to use it routinely because it would diminish the life of your battery, but for power outages, it would be great. Or allow us to charge other cars. How cool would that be if in the app you ran out of juice? You could put out an all points bulletin, agree to having your cameras recorded on both parties' sides for safety's sake, make an offer on how much it's worth to you to get out of this situation, and then somebody shows up and tops off your tank and you get going on your way. I don't understand Elon's reluctance for bidirectional. I hope we see that soon. The interior has held up great. I don't think we've had a single mark on the interior in the year that we've had it. A lot of people have asked for ventilated seats, and they are on the Model 3 refresh. But I've felt no need for them at all, and I have the black interior. There are some things we've learned, though. It took us almost a year to realize that the back seats actually recline a little bit. You just reach up here and pull the handle, and back they go. I appreciate the little pass down through the middle. That allows me to carry long things like 8-foot boards or even 10-foot PVC in there with ease. I already mentioned that the headrests are not adjustable, and if you pull them up, your seat backs will pop off. So don't do that. I still love the interior design. I like the wide open feeling. It feels like you're in a living room instead of in a car. I do find the seat a little uncomfortable. That's remained throughout the year. I just can't find a position that's comfortable for me. It's those side wings. The right side wing pushes into my right back and makes it a little bit uncomfortable. Nobody else apparently is having this issue, but it persists. Something I found very useful is to assign the fan speed to the left scroll wheel. To do that, it's really easy. Just press the left scroll wheel for about 3 seconds. Press it left to select the menu options. Select from a wide variety of options. One of those is fan control. I selected that, and now all I do is I just press the left scroll wheel for about 2 seconds and select the fan speed I want. It's very convenient. New backseat passengers in the Tesla almost always comment on how great the panoramic roof looks. But it does reflect a lot. So as my wife says, yeah, it's nice, but mostly what I'm looking at is the legs of the front seat passengers. And she has a point. I'm wondering if maybe they put a matte film on that or something that might reduce the reflection and make it even more enjoyable. And as I mentioned in my 1 month video, the sound system is incredible. I still will go out to the car just to listen to music because it's by far the best sound system I've ever owned. It really is incredible. My only suggestion for the interior would be that the back seat passengers have access to the rear seat climate controls, but the Model 3 refresh got a rear screen, so I'm assuming the Model Y refresh will get one too. I've got another suggestion. How about turning the rear trunk storage compartment into an insulated cooler with a drain on it so that we could put our groceries in there and they would stay cold on the way home, or we could fill it with ice and use it to keep popping things in it, use it as a cooler. I would think turning it into an insulated cooler with a drain plug would be minimal cost and very useful. And even if you wanted to, Tesla, make an optional upgrade that turns it into a built-in refrigerator. How cool would that be? Well, what can I say about full self-driving? It's tried to kill me, and I love it. Both are true. It actually tried to kill us. It turned us into high-speed traffic. I think looking at it, there's a video on that as well. It tried to turn us into high-speed traffic, and I think the situation was it used to have a thing I called snappy cars, and they have since fixed that, but I think it was just a bad coincidence of events. It got it thinking that cars were moving in ways they really weren't, and it had us turn into high-speed traffic. Anyway, I gave it up for a couple months. When I haven't had FSD, I've missed it, so it's a love-hate relationship. There's been a ton of progress made. It's so much smoother now, but there's still a long ways to go. Version 12 sounds like it's going to be what we've been looking for. Still have my doubts about whether Hardware 3 will be able to handle full self-driving, though. I'm just not sure it can see far enough to safely check for high-speed cross traffic. I'll be doing a video on that later. But when I don't have FSD, I sure miss it. For the most part, trip planning in the Tesla is effortless. I love the way you can control everything by voice. Show me nearby restaurants, take me to the nearest supercharger, things like that. But there are details that are lacking. And the irony here is that these improvements will only be needed for the next few years. We don't trip plan for our ICE cars because there's gas stations everywhere. It won't be too long before there's superchargers everywhere too. But in the meantime, I think there need to be some improvements in the Nav app. What I'd like to see is you be able to go in and set your waypoints, but for each waypoint you can set a departure time, how many local miles you'll drive while you're there, and whether you'll be leaving the Sentry mode on or off. If on, is it going to be left on all the time, or is it just going to be left on for a certain amount of hours at night? If you could add that to each waypoint, then it could give you a better idea, check the weather in advance, and give you a better estimate. We had a problem with this when we went to Lake Havasu, is we supercharged enough so that we could go to Havasu, drive around for 30 miles, and then get to the next supercharger on our way to Phoenix with about 15%. Well, we went to bed that night expecting to wake up in the morning saying we'd have 15% at the next supercharger. Instead, it was telling us we had 4%. And what had happened is the weather had changed severely overnight, and we were now going to have like 40-mile-an-hour headwinds. But also, I had left Sentry mode on, and that had eaten up like 7% of our charge. So to make the changes I suggested earlier would fix that and make it easier. But like I said, it's just going to be needed for the next few years. Before long, we'll have more chargers than we know what to do with. For the most part, driving this car has been a joy. It's so smooth. It's so comfortable. It's so quiet. It's so responsive. It's got more power than you know what to do with. The big issue we had, though, was in the wintertime when Regen Braking instituted a slide and spun me around and put me in a ditch. They warn you about that in the documents, that regenerative braking can initiate a slide, and that's exactly what it did. The key to me was to learn to drive differently. When I was learning to drive, they taught you that if you start sliding, you get off the gas and steer out of it. And that's the worst thing you can do if you're trying to avoid a regen slide. So the thing to do is if the car starts sliding, is get on the brakes. But there are other things. You can put it into off-road assist, which helps. I discuss all this in a video there. And I also look at how power is transferred between the front and rear wheels. It's kind of an interesting video. And there's also maybe a snow mode hidden in there as well. I'd recommend watching that if you're at all interested. Just remember that if the car starts sliding, get onto the brakes and let ABS steer you out of it. We had it slide at that exact same spot later, and I got on the brakes and I was able to steer out of it easily. My son had an insight that had escaped me, but once he pointed it out, it's true. The air is fresher when you get outside of a Tesla. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the lack of burning oil and hot rubber, but when you open the door and get out of the car, the air smells fresher than it does in an ICE car. Don't ask me why. We also found out that it's just as efficient almost to drive with your windows down as it is to drive with the windows up. So put the windows down. Again, you're going to laugh at me, but I swear the air is fresher in a Tesla with the windows down than any car I've ever driven before. I'd highly encourage you that if the weather allows, roll those windows down. We call the accelerator the giggle pedal because without fail, when you punch it, somebody in the car will start giggling. But there's a tip there. Make sure you tell people before you punch it, because I surprised my daughter once and she had a ponytail and it threw her head against the backrest so hard that it gave her a bruise. So let people know before you use the giggle pedal in full force. Eventually, I want to go cross country and camp in the back of my Tesla. And so I bought a decent mattress, really good one actually, and customized it to fit back there. I'll be making a video of that process in case anybody else is interested. So I decided I needed to test it, and unfortunately couldn't convince my wife to go with me, so I went camping by myself at one of our local campgrounds. And I really enjoyed the experience, and I slept pretty well too, and it's so cool looking up through that window at night. I was encouraged. So I'm looking forward in the future to taking this cross country and sleeping in the back. Well, let's talk accessories. The Max Spider mats have held up perfect. The inflator I've had to use a couple times and I really enjoyed it and it worked well. I've already told you how the protectant does an excellent job on the car. Man, keeps it gorgeous. And I found a mat for the back that's really inexpensive that I haven't mentioned before. I'll put the link for that down below. And I still love these little trash bin things. In fact, I'm going to give a couple of those away every week for the next 4 weeks. All you need to do to enter the drawing is just subscribe and comment and put the word Tesla in your comment. And every week for the next 4 weeks, I'll select a winner and I'll send you a couple of these trash bins. I think you'll be surprised at how useful they are. I'm probably also going to want to get privacy curtains for when I go camping, but I haven't done that yet, and so I can't recommend any. If you have any you recommend, I'd sure appreciate it if you'd let me know in the comments section. I love the tech in this car. I love that I don't unlock and have to lock my doors. I like that I don't have to start my car. I like that I can precondition my car so whether it's 105 out or -5, my car's nice and comfy and waiting for me. In fact, I created an Alexa skill that lets me say, Alexa, I feel the need for speed, and it plays the theme from Top Gun and starts preconditioning my car so it's ready for me when I go out to the garage. I love the fact that the satellite views are constantly visible on the screen if you choose. My wife is always finding things. There's so much tech in this car to love. We love this car so much that we upgraded to a 2023 model. And the reason I did that is because I think this is going to be my forever car. And I wasn't sure FSD was going to work on Hardware 3, so I wanted Hardware 4. And Elon told us that we could swap FSD from one car to another this quarter, so I took him up on his offer. We love this car so much. has almost zero maintenance. It's so quiet. It's so smooth. It's got more power than you'll ever need. It looks great. It has a great online community. The car gets better with every update. When has that ever happened when you buy a car? I mean, normally you buy a car, that's the best it's ever going to be. This car just keeps getting better. Its fuel costs are so low, it's almost embarrassing, especially in an area like ours where energy is so inexpensive. In my opinion, it's the best engineered car in the world and one of the safest. We're thrilled with this car. I obviously have suggestions that I'd like to see incorporated, but my gosh, this car is heads and shoulders above anything we've ever owned before. Like I've said before, this is not an evolution of car tech. This is a revolution, and we love it. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to get in the giveaway, just subscribe and leave us a comment and include the word Tesla. Like I said, we'll be giving out a couple of those trash bins every week for the next 4 weeks. Again, thank you for your time. Until next time, take care.